Whether you're in the playoffs or have clinched a spot, it's never too late to start thinking about next year when you're in a keeper league. Now is the time to stash players that are on the IL that will return in 2025. I got that and more on today's action-packed episode of Locked On Fantasy Baseball.
You are Locked On Fantasy Baseball, your daily fantasy baseball podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, fantasy baseball fanatics, and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Baseball podcast, brought to you by Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, we are your number one source for fantasy baseball knowledge, and thank you for making us your first listen each and every day. I'm your host, Matthew Ane. You can find me Matthew_Ane on X, Twitter, or whatever you want to call it. If you're watching on YouTube, please click the bell below to subscribe to the channel and give you a notification every time we drop a new episode. Wow, that's a mouthful. Also, please leave us a 5-star rating and review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you may listen. If you want just a little bit more than what we offer in this 30-minute podcast, check us out on Subtext and become a member of the Diamond Club. New members get a free 2 weeks, and all the benefits will be labeled out and listed and later in the show. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/lockedonmlb and use the code all lowercase lockedonmlb for first deposit match up to $100. And guys, I got a really great episode for you today. Dom isn't able to make it. So we're still trying to figure out, what's this fifth episode is going to be. But, I always start thinking about this time, 3 weeks out from the playoffs, what about next year, right? If I'm in a keeper league, who's sitting out on my waivers that I can possibly add now and stash for next year, right? Like guys that are going to be in the show later, like McClanahan, Sandy Alcantara, Brandon Woodruff, right? Like, do you add them now? We're going to get into them because they're on the show. It's a yes. The reason for this show is, yes, you're out of it now, maybe, or maybe you're not. And, next year is still a thing. How can I make myself better? How can I improve my team, right? What is my weakness this year, right? Do I have a really strong 2? Is there anybody really worth keeping? Got to really analyze your team, look at it, and probably add like 1 or 2 players off this list and just choose based off one availability, because that's going to lock you in and make your decision for you. And 2, who essentially, what are we going to do here? Like, are we going to have to? Can I rely on these guys going into next year? And we'll talk about all that, upsides, downsides, how we should add them, who we should add, and if you want to know how I'm prioritizing, join the subtext. Actually, I'm going to send out a list today and how it's going to go and things like that. All right. So I guess without further ado, let's just get into it. Let's hop in. Let's talk about our first guy here. They're not listed in any which order, so you won't be able to get a sense of who I'm prioritizing. This is also because I have people that listen to this show that are in my leagues, and they're probably going to be like, oh man, I didn't even think about this yet. Well, I'm crazy like that. And I don't want them to know who I'm prioritizing unless they're paying for that information. But let's get started. Let's talk about Brandon Woodruff. I mentioned him at the top, and Brandon Woodruff obviously has always been a great pitcher. Unfortunately, was dealing with the shoulder injury, couldn't really make his way back. After having such a great season last year. Funny enough, he pitched about 67 innings, but he had 74 strikeouts. He had a 2.28 ERA. He had a whopping 5 wins out of 6 starts. And, the whip was pretty nice too at a 0.82. Woodruff has always been solid. He hasn't had a season above 305 since 2020. And 2019, he had a 3.62 ERA. 2018, a 3.61. And 2017 was his first year in the bigs, and it was a 4.81. And that's understandable. Next this year he's 31. Going into next year, he's going to be 32. He's still, good in my opinion. Pitchers age differently than hitters, right? They get better as they get older, whereas hitters kind of you start seeing that decline. You become wiser, you become, a little bit more in tune and in depth with the league and kind of trends and how guys are. You've seen a lot of guys quite often, so you have that experience and that rapport to kind of know what they'll hit, what they'll swing for, and things like that. And Woodruff is at that advantage. And also too, Woodruff's just been a stud pretty much his whole career. So I'm going out there and I'm adding him in a lot of leagues. Here's the thing, right? So like, I have a lot more pitchers than I do hitters, because it's very rare that you get a hitter go out for a whole year. There's a few, like, like Ronald Acuna and stuff, that they tear an ACL, which Ronald Acuna is not on this episode. He's most likely not dropped in a keeper league. At most, he was traded. But, you know, guys that get Tommy John or have these weird shoulder injuries that put them out for a full season, they tend to get dropped because you can't really carry them for a full year. They're not as valuable because you can stream this position a little bit easier than you can do hitters. So I know that in a lot of leagues, Woodruff is out there. And here I'm just going to pull up the ownership percentage for Woodruff as well, just to give you a little bit more of just a perspective of what this is actually looking like right now. So he's 4% owned. So I guarantee that 4% is literally dynasty leagues. He wasn't kept going into this year. I could tell you that much. He was probably just undrafted and completely forgotten about, and nobody's going to stash him all year round unless, again, you're in a dynasty league. So Brandon Woodruff is a fine and available player that's out there right now that you can add and, start yourself off with the right foot next year. If you're in the playoffs and, you don't like your pitching as much, or you don't feel like you have a guy that you can lean on going into next year, yeah, add Brandon Woodruff. This is going to be great. Now, this next guy here, Spencer Strider, another name that, obviously started off the year with TJ, and his timeline's a little bit more further back than Woodruff's. I think he's supposed to be due back in, let's pull it up. I have it. I believe in May. Let me just get that real quick. Strider. So yeah, May 1st is his estimated return. Now, it's TJ. Luckily he got it early, like dumb early, thank God. Where we can kind of start saying, okay, he's probably worth an ad. He's probably going to be drafted pretty decent next year as well. So being ahead of the curve on Strider, for instance, right now is brilliant. He's 33% owned. He's more on the higher end. Like, he's been dropped in quite a bit of leagues, like I did in my keeper league. I wasn't holding on to him all year. I got better things to do, and plus IL hit heavy these last couple of years, specifically this year. So you kind of got to make that move. You kind of just had to drop him. So that's why the availability is out there. So if he is out in that league and, you feel like, okay, next year, you're in that spot where like, okay, I could probably afford, if I keep him, I can totally make sure that I can kind of sure myself up for a month, essentially, bearing no setbacks. It does come at risk with this one because he's not due back for the start of the spring training like Woodruff at February 2nd. So, this is a little bit more of a riskier one, but I still would do, because Strider's just a different kind of pitcher. And, he's kind of worth the wait. It's the same thing like Kodai Senga this year. He had, he's the extreme case and everything I'm worried about, right? Where, where Senga kept getting pushed back and back because of setbacks. And then somehow he ended up not being able to pitch all year. It's just really disappointing. But like, this is another world in reality. What this can happen with any of these players I'm talking about today. But specifically with Strider, there's not going to be a lot of answers until, you've already drafted. So taking the shot on Strider right now and stashing him actually puts you in a position for success and truly a lot of high upside. But it's not even the floor. It's not even the basement. It's like the storm cellar, like where, the tornadoes around you and everything's about to get ripped up from under you. So like, it could go two ways. It's very volatile, but it's worth the risk when it comes to Spencer Strider. But coming up next, I got guys like Sandy Alcantara, Jesus Luzardo, and some bats that we can get into, and then some more arms. I've just really mixed it all up and down so that we can kind of, get into this really, really comfortably and kind of see what's going on. But that's coming up next. Passion, the drive, and patience is the formula for winning championships. It's also your ride or die. It's also how you keep your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to its peak performance. Whether it's superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts, your number one ride or die will always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Motors Guaranteed Fit, your parts is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions may apply. eBay Guarantee Fit is only available for U.S. customers. Are you watching Fox Sports and ESPN on your TV all day? Have you had to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all that screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or free on the Amazon Fire TV channel app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Introducing the Locked On Fantasy Baseball Podcast Diamond Club on Subtext, your ultimate fantasy baseball companion. Rely on our dynamic content this season. Get real-time alerts right to your phone, including waiver wire rankings, instant call notifications, injury actions, and a whole lot more. Stay ahead of your fantasy leagues by joining the Diamond Club on Subtext, where your path to victory begins. Subscribe now and elevate that fantasy baseball experience. And all right, guys, we're back in it. Hopefully I can move a little bit faster, but at the same time, I don't have Dom to commentate, so I'm going to take my time. We're going to enjoy this. We're going to break down every single guy. And this next guy is Sandy Alcantara. Now, this one's a little bit tougher pill to swallow, only because of what Sandy did last year. And Sandy just kind of has a couple warts that kind of just, the unbelievers kind of can really muddy the water for us, right? And every guy has their warts. Let's put it that way. But Sandy last year, after having a fantastic season the year before, kind of just like makes me feel a little uneasy. But he's been good for years. Obviously 2022 was absolutely insane, finishing as a sub-3 with a 2.28 ERA. But how much is the last year? Is it really comparable in offense, right? So like you look at his underlining stats from last year, and there was a lot of good things. You look at his fastball movement, fantastic. His fastball velocity, 97.8. Was getting chases, not walking guys, not allowing barreling, and was creating a lot of ground balls. But he was allowing hard hit at a good amount of time. Average exit velocity was 88.8. Would like to see him get a little bit more whiffs and Ks, things like that. But Sandy's not known for like the Ks. Like he's kind of like even in that awesome season, he pitched 228 innings, but had 207 strikeouts. Like he's never going to be a K per 9 kind of guy. He doesn't really create the whiffs, but he does get guys to chase and things like that. But he does all the really good stuff, right? Like produces ground balls, doesn't allow guys to barrel, doesn't walk guys, gets them to kind of get chased, doesn't give up hard contact normally. He is just a guy that just does good things well, and he's a good pitcher, and even for baseball, for fantasy baseball, it translates. Now, last year was kind of really ugly in some of those like categories he's elite in, but I don't foresee that being real. He went down to Tommy John, obviously, and was done late, and you just kind of got to look at it and you got to go, okay, so Sandy was elite for the last couple years. He goes down to this. How are you handling it? What are you going to do? Well, the beautiful part is if you do add him, there's not as much risk as Strider. Strider, you're not finding out till May. Alcantara, you're going to find out the start of spring training, right? He's due back 2-2, which is great. So now you'll be able to get some information, but at least he's on your team that you can then make that decision later. Sandy, I think, is going to be somebody that we're going to be drafting probably as a top 36 pitcher. I wouldn't be surprised if he's anointed into the top 20, especially if he has a really strong campaign in spring. And there's a world in a way where he even turns into, the guy that's like, oh, okay, cool. We're going to draft him at top 12 again because he's just who he is. I don't see that happening. That's a little bit more on the hyperbolical side. But, hey, the key is you can have him on your team before anybody thinks about it. So I'm adding him now. Don't even think about it. Just don't think about it. Click, add, boom, done. All right, let's move on. Jesus Luzardo. Luzardo is an interesting one. So if all these guys are taken, he's my lowest one. I'll give you that. If all these guys are unavailable, then I'm going to go and add Luzardo and just make a decision next year. Luzardo, has the upside. He had a fantastic 2023 campaign, finishing with a 3.58 ERA with 208 strikeouts to 178 innings pitched with 10 winnings. Now, Luzardo just had one season essentially, and yes, it was great, but it wasn't great enough. For me to just say, hey, this kid is going to be legit, ba ba ba, etc. He's kind of shown signs when he was on in 2022, like, okay, we can kind of see 2023 happening. Did take that step forward, but this year has kind of been kind of a flop, and then he gets hurt, of course, and this is kind of all discouraging for him, and he's also due back um at the start of the season, so you can decide then. You know, it's only a back injury, it's not a shoulder or elbow, so it's a little bit more on the safe side than it is for the last couple guys that we're talking about here. So I can kind of say like, hey, he's probably worth a stash, especially if there's nobody else out there. But it's your decision essentially at the end of the day. I'm gonna stash Luzardo. The upside is fantastic in those regards. And again, he's the lowest priority. I'm only going to pick about two of these guys max, depending on, one, IL availability, two, do I have a lot of guys on the IL, and three, what my actual pitching staff looks like, right? Obviously, like adding Spencer Strider is a no brainer, having Woodruff or Sandy Alcantara as your two, or, at that point, if they're back to their normal selves, a one in comparison to what you compare with what you have now is a brilliant idea. So I would do that immediately. So adding them is definitely, smart of you, behooved of you, essentially. But yeah, this next guy here, Shane McClanahan of the Tampa Bay Rays. Another guy I'm big on. I love Shane. I've liked him since the start of his career, truthfully. He's somebody that has always stuck out. And, I expected big things from him last year, and he was great for when he was out there essentially. But there's just a few things like just getting the TJ kind of just really kind of burst my bubble. But he can't control that, unfortunately. So let's just dive into it. The last time he played too, because he was really good. You know, whew, I'm truly excited for this kid. Last year, all the stuff looked good. Fastball velocity at 96.8 miles an hour. Was getting guys to chase, getting the whiffs. Obviously, he was giving up a little too much hard contact in barrels, but producing ground balls, you know, things that he could make an improvement on and be just fantastic. He never really had the opportunity to do it. Just like in 2022, everything just kind of clicked for him. So you just got to, take a look and just experience. He's one of my favorite guys to add. He's young too. He's only 26, going to be 28 when he returns. I'm sorry, only 27, going to be 28 when he returns. You know, doesn't have many miles on him. One season at 166 innings pitched. Last year obviously was cut short, but he can totally see about 175, 180 innings next year as long as he's healthy, and pick up right where he left off and be that stud that he's meant to be. There's a lot of career in front of him when it comes to Shane McClanahan. So I'm totally good with going out there and adding him. I actually did that today because I knew that right after the show released, I was going to lose out on McClanahan. I have a feeling because a lot of people love him. So, you just got to make sure he's out there. And also, too, he's only 8% owned, which is absolutely bonkers and amazing. So, like, you can totally stash him right now, and then he'll be there for you next year and starting off your season on the right foot with Shane McClanahan. But coming up next, we got our last two pitchers and then two bats for you, and then we're going to get on out of here. But I tell you, it's going to be great, great names for you. I'll be right back after this. PrizePicks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports platform platform with over 5 million active members. They are the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. It's just you against the numbers instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks. You pick more or less than 2 to 6 player stats and watch the winnings roll in. Exploring my skills on PrizePicks this season adds an extra layer of excitement to daily fantasy sports. With just a few taps, you can transform $10 into $1,000 easily. PrizePicks is incredibly PrizePicks is incredibly user-friendly. You can make your selections, submit your entries in less than 60 seconds. And as the host of Locked On Fantasy Baseball, I actually have some great picks for you to get you started off on the right foot with, right? Offer Aaron Nola to have higher than 5 strikeouts in his next start. Offered Jonathan India to have higher than 1.5 total bases in the next outing. And lastly, offered Bryce Harper to hit a dinger in his next game. Download the app today and use the code Locked On MLB for first deposit match for up to $100. Again, download the app today and use the code Locked On MLB for first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, run your game. All right, latter half of this show, and I got some great names to finish it out with. And I mentioned him at the top, and it's Kodai Senga. Senga, we had an amazing first season in the bigs with us. And then this year, had like 2 starts. It was whatever, total of 5 innings. And then he went back down. And, that's kind of the part that's really just upsetting for me. The only thing is, he's due back after the fantasy season on October 5th. So, we'll see what the standings end up. I don't think the Mets are going to end up making the playoffs, if I'm being honest. I'm going to fact check myself on that one just as we go along here. But anyway, Senga is somebody that's going to provide, viable fantasy options for you next year. He's somebody that we were drafting high going into this year with the hopes that he was going to play this season. Obviously, that just didn't pan out. But, there's a world and a way where he could totally pull that off. So, as I'm saying this, right, New York Mets are actually 1, 2, 3, and 4th, so they could make the playoffs right now. In a wild card, 4th, and they're running for wild card, right behind Atlanta Braves and 1.5 games behind. So if they do manage to get in there, we might actually get to see Senga make decisions after the fact. So my bad to Met fans. But anyway, if Senga is able to go in, step up, play, and be that guy, we're going to see it. We're going to know. And at least you have that option to have him on your team, start your season off right next year with Senga, and, have a full scope of what this is going to be. Because there's a big difference between playoff baseball and spring training, right? Like, he's going to have, if he does come back in October, they decide to activate him, they're in the playoffs, you're going to have way more information on Senga than you are on any of these guys. Anything, he's the easiest one for me to stash just based off of that alone. How can I have the most information? Who am I going to have the most information on? What is the outcome going to be? Also, too, it's not like Senga was dealing with, like a shoulder or elbow issue. He's dealing with a calf injury, and that's something else that is not affecting him actually pitching in his rotation or his movement or anything of that can actually impact his performance. It's just a calf. Like he can, I wish it was as simple as, let's rub this one out and then just kind of get back out there. No pun intended, I promise. But, with Kodai Senga, I think that this is going to be an interesting ad, especially if we get to see him in the playoffs. But let's move on to Shane Bieber. Shane Bieber, unfortunately, went down after having a nice season this year. I want to see when he's due to return. So he's due back in June. So with that, he's the one that's the furthest out, and we're not going to get any information. And, ultimately it's going to be one of those things where you just kind of got to have faith. Essentially, I believe in Shane Bieber, the talent. He's going to be 30 next year. It's on the older side. He's on the sharper end side. He started off the season pretty nice, even though it was 12 innings with 20 Ks, no earned runs, .00. I'm sorry, a .91 whip. Like everything was looking good for him. We were all impressed. I was screaming victory from the rooftops over Dom because I knew he was going to be just fine. And Dom was saying he's washed up. Yes, I'm going to be talking smack because he's not here. But essentially, Shane Bieber is somebody that I think we can consider. I don't know if I'm really stashing him, but he's somebody to be aware of. Essentially, this is also a good opportunity. Even if you say you have 4 spots, which I now with COVID and just how relevant injuries have been, I run about 4 IL spots in all my leagues now. I think it's just the most responsible thing to do as a fantasy player and owner to kind of make it so you don't have to either clog your roster spot, or 2, have to drop players that you kind of want to hold on to because you that they're going to have a more of an impact down the stretch when they do return. So if you have empty spots and we're going into the season here, and we're going to the end of the season and you're probably not in a good spot, then, Shane Bieber is an ad for you. You see what happens. You make your decision. Maybe he's ahead of schedule, things like that. But, it's easier to have this kid on your team than not on your team and then not have the decision and think about, oh, when do I draft him? How do I draft them? ADP saying this now, et cetera. You kind of are ahead of the game and you can leave it up to yourself to make that decision at the end of the day. Let's move on. Let's talk about Christian Encarnacion-Strand. Strand pissed me off this year. I'm not even gonna lie. Came up, was not good, and on top of that, just had to go and get my hopes up with, oh yeah, he's gonna play. He's gonna play, guys. And then out of nowhere, because I traded for him, I might add, oh, now he's considering literally like an hour after I made the trade. He's now considering season-ending surgery. Like, you're kidding me, right? We're talking about a kid that's supposed to, go absolutely bonkers and hit like 75,000 home runs and, be this dude, but unfortunately is not and was not able to even stay on the field this year. I'm kind of upset about that, but you know what? He's due back at the beginning of the year, which is nice. The wrist surgery went well to my knowledge. And, you know, you look at what normally would happen with a player is when they come back from a wrist injury, usually the power's out, but it's usually because they're coming back right after it. He's going to have a whole off season to work on things. Strand is going to be somebody that I like going into next year. Um, will he be an actual keeper decision? That's on you. Depends on how bad your team is. Let's put it that way. If you have a good team, I'm not trying to keep him over anybody else. Don't get it twisted. Like, I'm a realist. I have realistic expectations with these guys. And Encarnacion-Strand, yes, the upside is absolutely valuable, but and bunkers. But I kind of would much rather just draft him than that. But depends though. Like, yo, you're in a keeper league. You kind of like sold the whole farm. You kind of just picked up whatever assets you could, and now you got to make a team again. And you're starting fresh. Then yeah, like Christian Encarnacion-Strand is a great stash for you now, and worry about it later. And you see what happens. It could be one of the pivot points of your season next year, essentially. But yeah, let's move into our last guy here, Evan Carter of the Texas Rangers. Evan Carter, oh, man, it's just so depressing. Another guy. If you've been watching all season, all off season, like all draft prep season, you know that I am depressed over this. Evan Carter went out with the back injury, played a grand total of 45 games, and did not look good. I think he was playing through this injury for most of the year, and ultimately is why he's out for a good chunk instead of just taking the time to get yourself right. I'm going to excuse this season entirely due to the injury. Back injuries are no good. It affects everything from your swing, your stance, everything, rest, all that stuff that kind of keeps you in the game. Evan Carter, I am kind of stashing. Again, it's closer to the Encarnacion-Strand thing, but at the same time, too, like, it's nice to have the young guys. They're probably out there in a lot of leagues, especially after we saw, like, okay, he's probably not going to return. Let me pull up his ownership percentage. But I know in a lot of leagues that I'm in, I'm seeing him available, and he's kind of worked it for me. Let me get it out there. So, okay, yeah, who doesn't like me? Here we go. Evan Carter, 36% owned, and I have a feeling it's going to drop even more if another guy gets hurt. So he's out there. I probably would stash him in a lot of spots just based off of depth of outfield, and things like that. We'll see. Again, that's why they're at the latter half of the show. They're the least important in my opinion, but they could also be, guys that you might be in consideration to bolster your lineup, especially if you're in a bad spot. There's always that bottom team that can generally use a push, and these two guys actually could do it for you. So, I would stash them now. But guys, think about the strategy, analyze your league and analyze your team, see where your weakness is, and then think about what guys I added, I talked about today. And if they're out there, you might want to consider adding them now. Yes, it's 3 weeks before playoffs, but at the same time, why get beat to the punch? Be early and, stay in this. And then the only unfortunate part is if somebody goes down. Let's just hope it's not somebody worth keeping. So we'll talk about that. But yeah, guys, thank you for listening. Dom will be back tomorrow, and we're going to be hitting you with probably a little keep trade cut action, and it'll be a good time. All right, guys, have a great rest of your day. Peace out.